What's up, guys? It is Q&A time on November 18th, 2018. Open Q&A this week, so got a variety of questions, and I will get right into them. First one was on Facebook. Actually, a couple pretty interesting questions, so I'm excited to answer these. Can you talk a little bit about gut health and hormone balance? Is digestion affected by hormones? If so, what are some indications of such an issue? So the answer to that, short answer is yes, that can be, or digestion can be affected by hormones. So, excuse me, there's a few instances in which this can happen. I'll go over probably some of the more common ones. Well, first would probably be adrenal hormones, like DHEA, for example, or just anyone that has adrenal hormone imbalance. And there's a number of hormones that the adrenal glands are going to produce and control: DHEA, cortisol, so certain metabolites and stuff will be a result of that as well. And you can absolutely have digestion issues with people that have adrenal issues of some kind. So, for example, somebody that has like adrenal insufficiency, where they have a severe like lack of adrenal hormones because they're just severely burnt out. A lot of those people will have things like diarrhea, for example. They just won't have very good digestion, just like a lot of loose stool, things like that. So I know that when I was having a lot of adrenal issues personally, I noticed that, and it took me a while to kind of link the two together, but I mean, it made sense once I figured it out. And part of this too is also that sympathetic and parasympathetic balance. Your parasympathetic nervous system needs to be activated, needs to be in control when we're talking about digestion. If you're sympathetically driven, you're probably more likely to have those digestive issues. And if you're sympathetically driven, that's adrenal related to a large extent, because a lot of the stress and a lot of the things like excessive stimulants and things like that, you're producing cortisol and norepinephrine and things of that nature. So so that's how that is tied together. So some other ones, or another one, females especially. I had read at one point, some literature talking about females and like menopause and postmenopause, and just females having issues with digestion that were in menopause or postmenopause. And at that point, they usually have lower hormones, lower progesterone, lower estrogen, maybe lower testosterone. So depending on how they reacted to menopause, how they fared in the affair. But so let's say they did, they come out of the other end with low hormones. Well, yeah, they might have, a lot of those women noticing constipation, actually. So progesterone and estrogen, for example, would be involved in motility, I guess, or just gastric emptying, like how quickly the colon empties bowels. So in the literature that I'm mentioning, they'd actually use progesterone and noticed that, well, obviously they're correcting a progesterone imbalance first and foremost, a deficiency, and then secondary to that, they also noticed that the digestion was moving pretty quickly, or moving more quickly. Now, one could assume that you would have the opposite, maybe too quick of gastric emptying. Things like diarrhea or just excessive bowels from those hormones being too high. So, you got both ends of the spectrum there. So, all right, next one, we're going to jump over to Instagram and the thread over here. All right. Okay. Might be controversial, but do you ever think that vegan imitation meat companies like Beyond Meat will ever have the food science to copy the micronutrient and amino acid profile of real meat, and maybe even enhance the fat profile to something similar of grass-fed meats or omega-3 fatty fish. I've noticed that most vegan brands are now coming up with ways for their products to have things like omega-3s for vegan fish sticks, for example. Curious on your thoughts on whether it's a step up or the fact that is more processed will lead to bad things people in terms of older generations developing allergens or something. No, I am not anti-vegan, by the way. Wow, so that's a super interesting question. Okay, so first off, I feel like you could probably maybe not match the profiles exactly, but I mean you can enhance things by adding ingredients, adding omega-3 sources, like, vegan omega-3 sources and things of that nature. I mean, you could enhance it. You could add amino acids. You could really add any of that stuff to make it essentially however you wanted. Now, could they make a piece of kale taste like a steak because they process it a certain way? That I don't know. That could be kind of scary. Maybe, probably could at some point, but so it's interesting to think about, and I think that we will slowly head in that direction. Though I think there are obviously always going to be some limitations, just because of what your base product is and what you're starting with. You're only going to be able to do so much with it. Now, could they, let's see. All right, where's the rest of the question? Oh, okay. So, is it going to cause things like food allergies or allergies of any nature? Potentially, depending on what the additives are and what things they have to add to make it taste a certain way. That could potentially be problematic, depending on what kind of artificial things they have to add or how they have to manipulate something. Obviously, we have to be able to digest it, for example. We have to not have any kind of negative immune response towards it, for example. So, yeah, it's certainly possible. Now, I mean, I don't know how far off we are from something like that happening, but I think it could certainly head in that direction. We have pretty much vegan versions of everything. A lot of the stuff really doesn't taste bad. If you like, you can make it taste like pretty much anything. But on the flip side, that could be a little scary. So we'll see. That is interesting. Is there a difference on how one should structure training or nutrition for enhanced versus natural? A short answer is no, not really. It's more like, how do you structure training and nutrition for the individual, not necessarily for their supplementation status. That's really what it's going to come down to. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be some subtle differences. Like, one person might have a higher ability to have like more higher protein synthesis rate or something like that, enhanced versus natural, or they have a little bit better recovery ability if they're enhanced. Perhaps they might, and so their training might change because of that. But nah, I mean, not really in general. It's just gonna be person dependent. Now, if you're looking as a base, like if you have to have a base idea, like, hey, I have person A and person B, they're pretty similar, one's enhanced and one's not, then yeah, I mean, you might say, hey, this person's gonna handle a little bit more training, and this person might be handling a little bit more protein or a little bit more food, and this person's not. Yes, you can make basic assumptions like that, perhaps, but again, it's gonna be it just comes down to the person. Just like anything else. I can say those things, but then again, having worked with all kinds of different people, I mean, you just throw it out the window. I mean, I've had plenty of natural clients that just eat more than the enhanced and train more, and it's just more genetic than anything. Okay, so let's see. Best remedy for back acne due to AAS use, and no Accutane, please. Okay, so you'd want to, and this is hard, you might want to figure out like what am I getting the acne from? Is it some kind of like androgen to estrogen ratio imbalance? Is it a DHT issue? I mean, like what's the issue? You can, a lot of people will get like DHT related acne, for example. I mean, it's not all of them. That's not the only reason, but it is a common reason. And you could use things like a topical DHT blocker, like Nizoral, the shampoo. You can use that as a body wash. And if you use it continuously and you notice that it helps, well, that's probably part of your issue, DHT related. Look at estrogen, for example. Make sure that it's not too high or it's not too low, and you don't cause any kind of skin issue that way. And control inflammation as well. So inflammation can also cause acne to some extent. That's a big part of acne is inflammation. So those would be the things that I would probably look for most commonly. You'd have to probably dig into your actual hormonal profile a little bit further beyond that to see what's going on. But again, the DHT one's pretty common, and just general inflammation's maybe a close second. So those are some things that you can look for, and make sure too that you're just staying clean, and you're bathing enough. And I know it sounds like simple, but it typically, sometimes a higher hormone profile can also lend itself to just more oil production too, and cause acne. And it can be, and little things could exacerbate it, like your pillowcase is dirty because you never change it or something. So I mean, it's a compounding issue. If you already have one issue like the oil, and you have these other issues like a dirty pillowcase or something that's compounding the issue, then you have a recipe for acne. So keep things clean. That's always, that's definitely helpful. Okay, so last one. Mechanisms by which supplemental pre and probiotic use may cause further gut issues. Okay. Well, mechanisms, I'm not sure if there's a name for the mechanism, but what I could say is that anytime that you change gut microbiome like that drastically, you might have some initial gut issues. Now, a lot of people will adjust to pre/probiotics in that way. They might have some initial gastrointestinal issues. They might have some problems, and then they typically balance out. It really depends on what is your current like gut flora profile like. How drastically are you altering? Like what strength of probiotic are you introducing? How quickly? So I mean, obviously, the quicker you change, the more likely you are to have some initial issues before things balance out. Now, there's some other things that can go along with that too. Certain GI issues can lend themselves, like they don't do good with like an environment that's fermenting a lot of nutrients. I'm trying to think, off the top of my head, one that comes to mind a lot that I see a lot of debate about is like SIBO, for example. So small intestine bacterial overgrowth. It's kind of debate whether or not probiotics are good for SIBO because it can cause. Some people say it can exacerbate the issue when that's not really the case. But certain probiotics that cause like a lot of lactate, they can exacerbate that issue. So if you do have some kind of gut issue, GI issue like SIBO, for example, make sure that you're not using probiotic strands that are going to increase that lactate production. So make sure that you are using correct probiotic strands if you're going to use them. So that would be something to think about. So you can look around, you can see that the lactate one's a common one. That's a big part of a lot of the probiotic products. So you might want to be careful of that. I'm not sure if the person asking this has like some current GI issues that they're worried about making worse, but that would be something to look up. And then whatever your actual GI issue is, you can jump on Google and see, hey, probiotic strands for enter your issue, and you probably get some help that way. And if you have any further questions, you can ask me. Like I said, it just kind of depends on what the current issue is. You could potentially make things worse. That's 100% true. But I wouldn't mistake making things work worse for that initial adjustment period. So don't confuse the two, because there could be overlap there, so. All right. Okay. I think that's it, guys. Good one this week. Got 5 or 6 good ones. Short and sweet. So we'll talk to you guys next week.